Rhetoric apart, what can Pakistan really do? Go to the United Nations, for starters, and cry foul. The process has begun. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi says that he has already written a letter to the UN, and it's safe to assume that he's not got a response yet, or he would have told the world about it by now. Now, what can and will the United Nations do? What has it done so far? Issued a statement urging restraint. Listen to their spokesperson. This is from the 5th of August.
We're following with concern the tense situation in the region. We're also aware of reports of restrictions on the Indian side of Kashmir, and we urge all parties to exercise restraint. I would add, as I've already said to some of you by email, that over the past few days, the UN Military Observer Group in India and Pakistan, otherwise known as UNMOGIP, has observed and reported an increase in military activity along the line of control.
So the United Nations advised restraint, which is standard. Then came the United Nations Human Rights Office. Well, they love talking about Kashmir, and the reports have been ill-informed, biased, and are routinely rejected by India. The UNHRC said that it was deeply concerned about the latest restrictions in Kashmir. Listen in.
We're deeply concerned that the latest restrictions in Indian-administered Kashmir will exacerbate the human rights situation in the region. We're seeing, again, blanket telecommunications restrictions, perhaps more blanket than we've ever seen before. The reported arbitrary detention of political leaders and restrictions on peaceful assembly. These restrictions will prevent the people of Indian-administered Kashmir and their elected representatives from participating fully in democratic debate about the future status of Jammu and Kashmir. Under the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which India has ratified, the right to freedom of opinion and expression includes the freedom to seek, receive, and impart information. While Article 19/3 of the Covenant allows states to impose restrictions on certain grounds, including protection of public order, the Human Rights Committee, which, as you know, monitors and interprets the Covenant, has warned that any such curbs must be necessary and proportionate and should not jeopardize the right itself. The fact that hardly any information at all is currently coming out from Indian-administered Kashmir is of great concern in itself.
Good statement that. He should hear himself speak. Under Article 19.3 of the Covenant that he mentions, as he himself said just now, states can impose such restrictions to protect public order. His words, which is exactly what the government of India is doing right now. The clause of responsible restrictions and reasonable restrictions is also part of the fundamental rights ordained in the Constitution of India. So India has neither violated the Constitution of India, its own, nor the Covenant of Human Rights of the United Nations. As for the United Nations, we know it is a toothless body which cannot proclaim human rights to any powerful country. Be it the border situation in the United States or the crisis in Iran or Syria or in Hong Kong or Xinjiang, you name it, they could not even force the Myanmar government to stop the genocide against Rohingya Muslims. When it comes to India, the UN gets on a moral high ground and it preaches human rights. But the sermons are out of place because India is in the clear legally and morally. Let us also look at how the UN reactions have been in the past and what is the procedure. In 1948, remember, India complained against Pakistan's forced occupation of Kashmir to the UN Security Council. Wrong move, but it happened. The UN proposed a 3-point action plan. Pakistan never withdrew its troops, so the whole mediation failed. The only fleeting success of that mediation was the brief ceasefire that it brought in 1949. It also negotiated a ceasefire line, which the UN would monitor. The few successes from United Nations mediation include the Indus Water Treaty in 1960 and the agreement over the Rann of Kutch in 1965. In 1971, the United Nations failed to broker peace between India and Pakistan. There have been as many as 17 resolutions on Kashmir by the United Nations Security Council, and each and every one of them have failed. So what will the UN do this time differently when Pakistan goes knocking? When a complaint concerning a threat to peace is lodged before the United Nations Security Council, it tries to make the two parties reach an agreement. That is the procedure, SOP. The UN can set forth principles for an agreement, undertake investigation and mediation, dispatch a mission, appoint special envoys, or ask the Secretary General to mediate. These are the options before the UNSC. Now, according to Article 36 of the UN Charter, the Security Council should consider procedures for settling disputes that have already been adapted by the two parties. In this case, it is the Shimla Agreement. So ideally, the United Nations should stay out of it completely because there is already a mechanism to resolve this. Besides, this is no threat to peace in the region. What happened in Jammu and Kashmir, what is happening in Jammu and Kashmir is an internal matter, an internal law to empower a state of India. Pakistan first said that it does not recognize Article 370 and Article 35A. Now the question is, why is Pakistan crying foul and running from pillar to post, from UN to China to possibly the ICJ in response to India's move on Kashmir, scrapping Article 370, which Pakistan doesn't even recognize? Now to the United Nations, the global body says it is concerned about the situation in Kashmir, concerned about what we ask. Also, the United Nations neutrality is under question, and I'm not saying that the UN has vested interests, but look at their funding pattern. The funding for UN MOGIP, MOGIP, which was formed to maintain peace in Kashmir, comes from the US. The budget is about $20 million. The US alone pays $4 million, which is 22% of the budget to maintain peace in this region. This adds another dimension to the story. Is the UN a proxy body of the US and other Western powers? Is that why the UN is keeping mum on their violations? This is food for thought. We'll discuss it some other day.